The wind rolled across the open fields, carrying dust from the dry ground and the faint smell of cedar from the distant ridges. For most folks passing through the wide stretch of land, it all looked peaceful. The ranch house stood steady, the barns were still upright, and cattle grazed without a care. But inside that world lived a man who felt everything slipping through his fingers, one day at a time. He had held this ranch together for years with nothing more than grit, long hours, and a few loyal hands. Yet, even with all that effort, it felt like the land was turning stubborn on him. Storms had battered the fences, drought had drained the riverbed, and debts had piled up in quiet stacks he tried not to look at for too long. It felt like a slow crumble, the kind a man notices before anyone else does. He woke before the sun each morning, not because he wanted to, but because sleep no longer offered comfort. The moment his eyes opened, the weight of everything he needed to fix pressed down on him. But he still pulled on his boots, still walked out to the stables, and still moved through chores with the same discipline he had always known. Chores did not care how a man felt. The animals needed feeding, the water troughs needed checking, the barns needed cleaning. And at the center of that routine stood his horse, a strong gelding with a proud neck and a calm mind, the one steady presence in his life. The horse had been with him through years of work, storms, long cattle drives, and long stretches of loneliness. While the man's world felt shaky, the horse never lost that quiet spark in his eyes, as if he believed there was still something good waiting up the trail. The man often found himself resting his forehead against the horse's shoulder during the early mornings, letting the warm breath of the animal remind him that loyalty still existed. Some days that was the only thing that kept him from giving up entirely. Each morning he saddled the horse and rode the perimeter of the ranch. It used to be a habit meant only to check fences and see how the land was holding. Lately, it had become his way of trying to find hope in the wide fields. He watched the sky change colors as dawn rose, hoping the new day would bring some kind of sign, a small change that things might be all right again. But day after day nothing shifted. The wind felt heavier, the fields looked more tired, and he felt more alone. Neighbors came by sometimes, offering small conversations meant to lift his spirits. They meant well, but he could see a familiar look in their eyes, the look people give when they see someone struggling but do not know how to help. He thanked them anyway, smiled as best as he could, and kept his troubles mostly to himself. Folks around him whispered that he was working too hard, carrying too much, trying to do everything alone. Maybe they were right, but he could not let go of the land. It held memories of his father, his younger years, and the dreams he once believed would last forever. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped toward the hills and painted the world in a soft golden hue, he stood beside the corral watching his horse trot around in quiet circles. The fading light caught the horse's mane and turned it into a copper ribbon. It reminded the man of better seasons when the grass grew high, the water in the rivers ran clear, and the world felt alive. He leaned on the fence rail and tried to picture a future where things were different, where the ranch was thriving again. But the more he tried, the thinner those images became. Still, he noticed something unusual that evening. The horse kept lifting his head toward the far end of the property, ears flicking forward with sharp focus. At first the man brushed it off, assuming the horse had caught the scent of a deer or heard something in the brush, yet the behavior continued. Every time the horse paused, he stared the same direction with a steady intensity that seemed new. The man walked out to the horse and rubbed his neck, asking softly what had caught his attention. The horse snorted and stamped the ground, restless but not frightened, almost as if trying to tell him something. The man tried to shake it off and return to his chores. Plenty of animals reacted to things a human could not sense. Coyotes, distant cattle, a squirrel rustling leaves could stir any creature. But that night, even as he sat by the dim lamp in the kitchen, he kept thinking of the way the horse had looked toward the back acres. Something about it lingered in his mind, stirring a faint unease mixed with curiosity. The ranch had corners he rarely visited anymore, places where old structures had fallen apart and brush had grown thick. He wondered if something out there had changed, or if the horse had simply been restless. The next morning, before the sky fully brightened, the man stepped outside and found the air cooler than usual. He let out a breath and watched it hang pale in front of him. The horse stood at the gate of his stall, ears pointed toward the same area of land. The moment the man opened the door, the horse nudged him with unusual urgency, then stepped outside and turned his head sharply toward the distance. The man frowned and tightened the strap of his coat. He felt the first spark of something he had not felt in a long while, a sense that maybe he should listen. He saddled the horse and rode out in the direction the animal kept signaling. The morning light remained soft and muted, creating long shadows across the fields. As they moved, the horse grew more alert, picking up pace with a kind of energy that made the man sit taller in the saddle. He followed the movement, letting the horse lead them across dry patches of grass, toward a cluster of old trees he had not approached in months. His chest grew tighter the closer they came. He could not explain why. Maybe it was the stirring of instinct or the sense that whatever waited there would matter more than he expected. The horse slowed near the trees, breathing hard yet steady. He moved between them and stopped near a patch of tall brush, lowering his head and pawing the ground with insistence. The man dismounted and tried to calm the horse, though he felt his own nerves rising. He pushed aside some of the brush, expecting nothing more than a fallen log or tangled roots. Instead, he saw a narrow opening in the earth near the base of a ridge, half hidden by vines. It was something he had never noticed before. The opening was not large enough to be a natural cave, and it was too straight to be the work of animals. It looked like something man-made, forgotten long ago. For a moment he stood still, unsure if he was imagining it. The horse nudged his shoulder again, urging him closer. A wave of unease rolled through him, but so did a faint pull of hope, the kind he had almost given up on. He knelt beside the opening and brushed away dirt, revealing more of the structure beneath. The edges were solid, shaped, intentional. His heartbeat grew louder in his ears as he realized this was no ordinary hollow in the ground. Something was hidden there, something someone had once taken great effort to conceal. He leaned forward and reached toward the darkness inside, feeling the cool breath of air rising from the hidden space beneath the earth. He could not yet see what lay inside, but he knew with absolute certainty that this discovery would change everything. He felt the truth settle into his bones like a signal he had needed for a long time. And just as he braced himself to uncover more, the ground beneath him shifted slightly, and a faint sound echoed from deep inside the hidden structure, a sound that made him freeze in place. It was soft, yet unmistakably real, as if something or someone had been waiting down there all along. The horse stepped back, snorting with tension, and the man knew this moment marked the start of something he was not prepared for. The ranch, his struggles, his fading hopes, all felt suddenly tied to the secret hidden beneath the earth. And before he could move or decide what to do next, another sound drifted upward, clearer this time, pulling him into a mystery that would change the path of his life in ways he had never imagined. The faint sound rising from the hidden space held him in place longer than he expected. It was not loud, not threatening, yet it carried something that tightened every muscle in his body. He stayed crouched by the opening, barely breathing, listening for anything that might tell him what lay below. The horse shifted his weight behind him, hooves scraping the ground in a nervous rhythm. The man lifted a hand to calm him, but never took his eyes off the darkness in front of him. He felt the cool air rising from the opening brush across his skin. It smelled faintly of old earth, stone, and something he could not identify. It had the scent of time, of secrets, of a forgotten story buried beneath his own land. He reached out again, brushing aside more soil to reveal the shape of a wooden frame, worn down by age, but still solid. Whoever built it had used real skill, shaping the entrance with purpose. That realization struck him harder than he expected. This was no accident of nature. Someone had dug, carved, and hidden something here long before he ever rode across this land. He stepped back to steady himself, trying to understand why his horse had led him here in the first place. The animal did not look frightened. He looked alert, as if he knew this spot held something important. The man wondered how long the horse had sensed this place and why he had acted now. Maybe animals felt things humans ignored. Maybe the horse had been trying to tell him something for days. Either way, he stood there with a growing sense that this hidden space and his growing troubles were connected in a way he had yet to understand. He rose to his feet and walked a small circle, running a hand across the back of his neck. The fields stretched quiet around him, the morning still young but carrying the heavy weight of unanswered questions. He took a breath and looked toward the ridge. The land there rose in a gentle slope, covered in scrub brush and old stone. It had always felt unremarkable to him, just another part of the ranch he did not have the time to notice. Yet here he was, staring at an opening that suggested someone else once found reason to carve into this ridge. Someone who had purpose, secrets, maybe even plans that never reached daylight. He wanted to climb down immediately, to see what waited inside, but something held him back. It was not fear, not exactly. It was the understanding that whatever lay beneath the surface was bigger than a morning of curiosity. If he went down there, even for a moment, his life might shift in ways he could not take back. He felt unsteady, still worn down from months of hardship, and unsure if he was ready to find something he had never expected. So he stepped away from the opening and walked back to the horse, laying a hand along his warm neck. The horse lowered his head and snorted softly, as if encouraging him again, but the man shook his head. He needed time to think. The ranch still had morning work waiting, and the day would not pause for his discoveries. He mounted the horse and rode back, his mind lingering on the hidden structure even as he checked the cattle and filled water troughs. Every task felt distant, like his hands worked out of habit while his thoughts drifted beneath the ridge. By noon, he knew he could not keep the secret to himself much longer. The weight of it pressed on him, not in a dangerous way, but in a way that demanded attention. Later that day he found himself in the barn repairing a broken latch. Sunlight filtered through the gaps in the boards, casting shifting lines of brightness across the floor. The rhythmic sound of the hammer usually settled him, but today it only reminded him of how noisy the world felt above ground compared to the silent pull of the hidden place. He thought of his father and the many stories he used to tell. None had mentioned hidden structures or secrets buried on their land. But his father had been a private man, the kind who believed not every truth needed to be spoken aloud. The thought made him pause. Could his father have known something? Could this be part of the family history he never learned? He shook the thought away and finished the latch. As he set the hammer aside, he heard the faint sound of hoofbeats approaching. One of the ranch hands stepped into view, guiding a pair of cattle toward the corral. The man nodded at him, offered a few quiet instructions, and watched as the hand went back to work. For a moment he considered telling him about the discovery, but stopped himself. He did not want too many eyes on that place until he understood what it meant. As the afternoon stretched on, clouds gathered and the wind shifted. He felt the pressure in the air change, a sign of weather moving in. He walked out to the pasture and scanned the sky, taking in the rolling shapes above the hills. Storms came often enough, but this one felt different. The darkening sky cast a strange hue over the land, making the ridge appear almost sharper, almost calling to him. He felt a pull in his chest, urging him to return before the storm hit. He went back to the stables and found his horse restless again, pacing in his stall. The animal looked toward the ridge once more, ears pointed in the same direction as before. The man tightened the straps on the saddle and mounted without hesitation. The storm felt close, but something stronger tugged at him. He rode out, the wind catching at his coat as the sky dimmed. When he reached the ridge, the air felt heavier and colder. The opening remained half hidden, untouched since the morning. The horse lowered his head again, urging him closer. The man crouched beside the entrance and pressed his hand against the wooden frame, feeling its roughness beneath his fingers. He studied the edges, the shape, the way the opening angled downward. Whoever built it had cared enough to make it strong and discreet. He leaned closer and peered inside. The darkness swallowed everything, but he could hear faint movement, not from an animal, but something quieter. A soft drip of water echoed from deeper within, suggesting an underground chamber or a passage extending farther than he expected. He felt a wave of curiosity mixed with the tension that never left his chest. The ranch had never offered mysteries like this. His life had been built on routines, long days, and familiar patterns. But now he stood before a place that did not match anything he knew. He sat back on his heels and listened to the wind rustling the brush above him. The storm clouds thickened overhead, turning the sky into a deep shade of gray. He looked around and noticed something he had not seen before. Near the base of the ridge, the ground shifted in a way that suggested foot traffic from many years ago. The dirt was slightly more packed, the brush growth uneven. It hinted at a path once used by someone who visited this hidden spot often enough to leave a mark. He traced the faint line of the old trail with his eyes, wondering where it once led and who had walked it. He could feel the land whispering its story in pieces, asking him to put them together. The ranch had always felt like part of him, a place built on sweat and history. But now he realized parts of that history had been hidden from him, sealed beneath the earth long before he was born. He felt a strange mix of unease and hope. The ranch had been failing him in so many ways, wearing him down each day. And now, as if timed by fate, a secret had revealed itself, offering something he did not yet understand. Maybe it was an answer. Maybe it was a warning. Maybe it was both. A gust of wind swept across the ridge, carrying the first drops of rain. He stood and wiped his hands against his coat, staring at the opening as if it might speak. He knew he would return again, maybe even climb down into the darkness when he felt ready. But not now, not with the storm rolling in and his thoughts still scattered. He mounted his horse and rode home, feeling the weight of the mystery settle deeper into his heart. The rain grew steady as he reached the ranch house, tapping against the windows and filling the air with the scent of wet earth. He sat at the table, the lamp casting a warm glow across the wood, but his mind drifted far from the room. He could still feel the cool air rising from the hidden space, still hear the echo of the faint sound rising from below. The storm outside rumbled, but the storm inside him felt louder. He knew he had uncovered something that could change everything. He also knew he was not ready to face it yet. The night grew darker, the rain heavier, and he sat there feeling the quiet thrum of a secret calling him back. And deep beneath the ridge, unseen and untouched, something waited. The storm lasted through most of the night and he barely slept. Every time the thunder cracked, he pictured the dark opening beneath the ridge as if the sound somehow echoed from inside it too. When the rain finally slowed and the wind eased, the ranch fell into that quiet hum that follows a long night of weather. But instead of calming him, it only made the hidden mystery feel louder in his thoughts. He stepped outside in the early light, mud sticking to his boots, the air cool and still heavy with the scent of rain. The ranch looked washed clean, yet the weight of what he had found clung to him. The horse stood near the fence, already alert and watching him. It felt like the animal had hardly rested either. The man rubbed his tired eyes and walked toward him. The horse flicked his ears toward the ridge again, then back at him, as if reminding him of the place buried under the hill. He shook his head gently and said he needed time. Even so, he could feel that steady pull inside him. Whatever lay beneath that ridge was not finished calling him. He saddled the horse and rode out to check the cattle. The storm had knocked down a few sections of fence, and water still pooled in low spots across the field. He worked for hours, repairing boards, tightening wire, making sure the animals were safe, but his mind drifted constantly. Every time he hammered a nail or pulled wire across a post, he thought about the wooden frame in the earth, the strange path leading to it, and the faint sounds rising from inside the hidden space. He wondered if the storm had affected the structure. He wondered if there was more to uncover. He wondered why he had never noticed any of this before. By late morning, the ranch hands arrived, helping to clear fallen branches and lead cattle away from the soggy ground. They talked loudly, laughing here and there, trying to lighten the mood after the rough night. The man appreciated their work, but their voices felt distant. He moved among them, giving instructions, fixing problems, doing his best to stay focused. Yet, every few minutes he caught himself glancing toward the ridge, not because he meant to, but because something inside him had changed. The land no longer felt familiar. It felt layered, hiding truths he had never thought to look for. While repairing a gate, he overheard two hands talking nearby. They mentioned strange things the storm had uncovered on other properties, bits of old metal, broken pieces of structures, even a buried sign from a forgotten road. One of them joked that maybe the land wanted to show people what they had missed. The man paused, hammer mitter. Their words struck him harder than he expected. It sounded too similar to what he was feeling. As much as he tried not to draw attention to the secret beneath the ridge, his mind kept circling back to it. In the afternoon, as he walked the property, a new worry crept into his thoughts. If he had found something hidden, something once important or valuable, what would happen if others discovered it too? He did not know if the hidden space held danger or treasure or just a forgotten story. But he did know the ranch had been under pressure from outside forces. There had been whispers of buyers wanting land nearby, talk of new projects moving close, rumors of surveyors poking around more often than usual. He had ignored most of it, too focused on surviving each day. But now he wondered if someone else already knew something he did not. He returned to the ridge later in the day, saying nothing to anyone as he rode out alone. The storm had washed away much of the loose dirt, and the hidden opening was slightly more exposed. He knelt and cleared the edges again, removing soaked leaves and mud. The wooden frame looked older than he first thought, its grain worn and darkened by years of moisture. He ran a hand along it and felt grooves carved into the surface. At first they looked random, but after brushing away more dirt, he realized they formed shapes. Not letters he recognized, but patterns made with intention. He studied them, tracing each groove with his fingertips. They could have been old markings from whoever built the hidden space. Maybe they were simple symbols or signs meant for someone who once knew their meaning. They stirred something inside him, a faint feeling that the past had been watching him long before he arrived. He wondered how deep the structure went and what else lay inside. He leaned closer, listening. The dripping sound from earlier had grown softer, but still there. And now there was something else, a faint hum he could not place. It felt like the earth itself breathed below him. He tried to calm the unease rising in his chest, telling himself it was probably water collecting in a deeper chamber. But he could not shake the sense that the place was alive with more than simple echoes. The horse pawed the ground behind him again, restless but not afraid. He turned to him, noticing the alert focus in the animal's eyes. It was unusual even for a horse as smart as his. The man whispered a quiet reassurance, though he was not sure who he was trying to comfort more, himself or the animal. He spent the next hour circling the ridge, looking for other signs of human work. The old path he noticed before became clearer the more he studied the ground. It curved gently through the brush, disappearing into what used to be thicker trees. He followed it as far as he could, pushing aside branches and stepping over stones. The path eventually widened near a cluster of old roots, and in that spot the earth looked disturbed as if something once rested there. He crouched and touched the ground. The soil was softer, looser, almost like a covering. It made him wonder if the hidden opening was only one part of a much larger place. He stood and scanned the area. For the first time since the storm, he felt the ranch pressing in around him, not in the usual way of work and responsibility, but in a deeper, older way. The land held history, secrets, and maybe even unfinished stories. His father had taught him to respect the land, but he had never imagined the land might hold memories of its own. On his way back, he noticed a truck parked near the front gate. A man from town stepped out, carrying a clipboard and scanning the property as if searching for something. The stranger greeted him and explained he was checking nearby lands for survey markers after the storm. He asked a few polite questions, but the man sensed something behind his tone, a curiosity not rooted in weather damage. When the surveyor asked if he had noticed anything unusual on the property, the rancher felt the question hit too close to home. He answered simply that storms always stirred up trouble and left it at that. The surveyor nodded, made a few notes, and seemed to linger a moment longer before climbing back into his truck. As he drove away, dust rising behind him, the rancher felt his unease deepen. He wondered if the man had been telling the full truth or if someone else had sent him. By evening he returned to the ridge again, this time staying just long enough to make sure the storm had not loosened the surrounding ground too much. He looked into the darkness one more time, feeling the cold air rise against his face. The hum still lingered deep below. He knew he could no longer approach this discovery like a simple curiosity. It had become part of his world, part of his struggle, part of the ranch's hidden story. As night settled in, he stood outside the house, watching the ridge from a distance. The horse stood quietly nearby, eyes following the same direction. The rancher felt a knot form in his stomach. He did not yet understand the secret lying beneath his land, but he knew he was no longer the only one drawn to it. Forces he did not know had begun to move. Change was rising from the earth, and he stood at the edge of something he had never expected. The wind brushed across the fields, carrying quiet whispers through the grass. The sky darkened, stars hidden behind thin clouds. He took one last look toward the ridge before heading inside, knowing sleep would be hard to find again. Some secrets waited patiently beneath the ground. Some were waiting to be found, and some, once uncovered, changed everything they touched. The night settled heavy over the ranch, the kind of night that felt too quiet, too watchful. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling and listening to the soft ticking of the old clock on the wall. Every sound in the house felt sharper. The wind brushing the windows, the boards settling under the weight of time. Even the faint whinny of his horse outside made his pulse tighten. His mind refused to rest. The hidden opening under the ridge kept pulling at him like a hook caught deep in his thoughts. Before dawn he stepped outside, pulling his coat tight as the cold air wrapped around him. The sky still held the last shade of night, but he could already see the faint line of blue forming on the horizon. He walked to the stable and found his horse waiting, standing silent with an alertness that mirrored his own. The man ran his hand along the horse's neck and whispered a quiet greeting. The animal flicked his ears forward, already sensing he was going back to the ridge. He saddled up and rode through the quiet fields, the grass wet with dew and the distant hills still cloaked in shadow. Every hoofstep echoed louder than usual in the morning stillness. As he approached the ridge, the tension inside him grew. The place no longer felt like a simple part of the ranch. It felt like the center of everything, the hidden structure, the old markings, the strange hum rising from below. Even the storm seemed tied to it somehow, as if the land itself had been shifting to reveal what had been buried. He dismounted near the ridge and crouched by the opening again. The wooden frame looked older in the pale morning light, its edges rough and worn. But something was different. He leaned closer and saw the soil had shifted since the day before, as if something inside had pressed against the ground during the night. He placed his hand on the earth and felt a faint warmth beneath it. The realization sent a chill up his spine. He whispered to himself that the warmth could come from water or trapped air. But even as he spoke the words, he did not fully believe them. The hum was still there, softer than before, but steady, like a distant signal pulsing from deep below. He felt the air brush against his face, colder than the morning breeze, rising through the opening as if the earth exhaled. He told himself he needed a plan before climbing down. He needed proper tools, a lamp, and someone nearby in case something went wrong, but he also knew he could not tell anyone yet. Not until he understood what he was dealing with. The less people who knew, the safer the secret would remain. He stood and walked along the ridge, studying the faint old path again. It still held clues he could not interpret. As he followed it, he noticed another sign he had missed earlier. Some rocks had been arranged near a fallen log, lined up in a straight pattern too even to be natural. He crouched and brushed dirt away from their edges. Beneath two of them he found carved lines similar to the markings on the wooden frame. He stared at them, unsure what they meant but feeling the connection run deep. His father had always said the land remembered more than people realized. Now he wondered what stories his father had known and never spoken. The thought stirred something painful in him, something tied to the years he spent believing he understood the ranch only to discover how little he truly knew. As he examined the rocks, he heard the distant sound of an engine. He straightened and looked toward the front of the property. A truck approached slowly, its tires crunching against the gravel. His stomach tightened. It was the same surveyor from the day before. He walked his horse back to the yard as the truck pulled up. The surveyor stepped out, offering a polite greeting, but his eyes scanned the surroundings with sharp attention. He said he needed to double-check a few things after reviewing notes overnight. The man forced a calm expression, nodding through the explanation, but unease crept up his spine. The surveyor asked more direct questions this time. Had the storm damaged any unusual areas? Had any old structures surfaced? Had he noticed shifts in the ground? Each question cut closer to the truth, as if the surveyor suspected more than he was letting on. The rancher kept his tone steady, answering carefully, avoiding details, and offering nothing that pointed toward the ridge. Still, he caught the way the surveyor's gaze lingered on the hills behind the house. It lingered too long. Far too long. The man tightened his jaw. If the hidden space truly held something important, then he was not the only one searching. Someone else was watching. Someone else wanted answers. And they might be willing to push harder to get them. After the surveyor left, he walked back to the ridge with a growing sense of urgency. He knew he needed to uncover what lay below before others sniffed around and discovered it for themselves. He crouched at the opening again, staring into the darkness and listening to the hum that seemed to rise with every passing moment. The wind shifted suddenly, carrying the scent of damp earth. The horse behind him blew through his nose, ears pricked forward, eyes focused on the ridge as if seeing something the man could not. The rancher leaned closer and lowered himself onto the ground, letting his arm reach farther inside the opening. His fingers brushed against something solid just below the surface. Wood or stone, possibly part of a deeper structure. He withdrew his hand and sat back, breathing hard. The urge to climb down pressed against him stronger than ever, but he forced himself to pull away and return to the ranch. He needed supplies, rope, a lantern, something to pry open the deeper entrance. He spent the afternoon gathering what he needed, waiting for the ranch hands to leave for the day so no one would question him. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in warm streaks of orange and gold, he packed the supplies into a saddlebag and led his horse toward the ridge again. The shadows stretched long across the land, the kind that made ordinary places look unfamiliar. The ridge almost seemed taller, darker, waiting. Behind him the ranch looked small in the fading light, the world narrowing down to the ridge, the opening, and the secret below. As he dismounted and removed the supplies, the hum grew louder, as if giving him a warning or a welcome. He could not tell which. He took a deep breath, knelt down, and cleared more dirt from the top edge of the opening. His hands shook slightly, not out of fear, but from the weight of knowing he was crossing a point he could never return from. He pulled a lamp from the bag, lit the wick, and held it near the opening. The flame flickered as the cold air from below brushed against it, stretching shadows across the ridge wall. He lowered the lamp inside, letting the warm light chase back some of the darkness. It revealed the beginning of a narrow passage, reinforced with wooden beams, sloping downward at a steady angle. The walls were made of old stone, fitted tightly together. Someone had spent serious time shaping this place. Someone had built it for a reason. He tied a rope around a sturdy tree root along the ridge and tested it with his full weight. It held firm. He looped the other end around his waist. His horse watched every movement with tense focus, shifting restlessly. The man took the lamp in one hand, gripped the wooden frame with the other, and lowered himself toward the hidden passage. His boots tapped against the stone as he descended slowly. The air grew colder, thicker, and the hum grew stronger, vibrating through the walls around him. Halfway down he paused, feeling the earth tighten around him. The lamp cast a faint glow ahead, catching glimpses of deeper chambers, old beams, and shadows he could not fully see. His heartbeat echoed in his ears, matching the rhythm of the hum. He continued downward until his feet touched solid ground. The passage stretched ahead of him, wider now, lined with markings that looked older than anything he had ever seen. He lifted the lamp, and the light revealed a wider chamber just beyond the narrow slope. He took one step toward it, then another. The hum grew louder, and the ground beneath him seemed to pulse. Not violently. Just a faint vibration, like something deep inside the earth shifting awake. He raised the lamp higher, straining to make sense of the shapes in the chamber. Something sat in the center, half buried in stone and earth. It glinted faintly in the warm light. He took one more step. A sudden noise echoed behind him, sharp and out of place, like something or someone had disturbed the entrance above. He froze, his breath caught in his chest. The lamp's flame flickered wildly, and shadows danced across the stone walls. He turned slowly toward the sound, knowing he was no longer alone. Not above, not below, not anywhere in the ridge. And the moment he realized that, the hum swelled with a force that made the ground tremble under his feet. The moment the hidden door groaned open, he felt the last of his fear press against his ribs like a tightening rope. For a second he stood still, unable to move forward or turn back. The lantern flame shook a little in his hand and threw long shadows across the narrow passage. His faithful horse waited just behind him, breathing hard from the run that had carried them here, the run that had chased away more than danger. It felt strange that everything he had been fighting for, everything he feared losing, was about to be decided in this one final step. His ranch, once full of life and promise, had crumbled piece by piece until he thought nothing could be saved. The debts, the drought, the long lonely nights that nearly hollowed him out. Through it all, he had kept going for the sake of the land he loved and for the horse that had stayed by his side when everything else slipped away. Now that same horse had led him to this forgotten place, nudging him toward clues he never saw coming. Even when he doubted himself, the animal never doubted him. It was as if the horse had known there was something buried in the dust, something worth fighting for, something that could change everything. When he stepped inside, the air felt cooler and carried the faint smell of old wood. The small room held a few battered crates, a crook table, and a box left open on top. Inside that box lay papers that looked ordinary at first glance. But as he lifted them, his heart thumped hard. They held signatures, dates, and maps that matched nothing he had ever known about his land. A secret history had been hidden beneath someone's lies. A truth that could either fix everything or make things worse if placed in the wrong hands. He understood then why strangers had been watching the ranch, why someone had tried to buy the land at a suspicious price, and why the man who once claimed ownership avoided giving straight answers. He sank into the chair, lantern burning low, and read line after line. He found proof that the land had been mismanaged long before it ever reached him. He found records that showed water routes had been redirected years ago and that someone had been stealing from the ranch under his nose. He found the key that could stop the foreclosure, restore his name, and expose everything that had been done to tear him down. Relief washed through him so hard he had to steady his breathing. He looked at his horse standing in the doorway as if the animal had known from the start that this moment was waiting. He packed the papers carefully, his hands shaking a little. After all the struggle, all the fear, all the days when he thought he was finished, there was finally something real to hold on to, but he still had to make it back. He still had to stand up to the folks who wanted the truth buried. He still had to prove that everything he had found tonight was real, and not just the dream of a desperate man holding on to hope. He mounted his horse, gripping the reins tight. The sky outside had softened into the pale light of early morning, and the wind felt cooler against his face. He took a long breath and nudged the horse forward. The ride back felt endless. Every sound made him look over his shoulder. Every cloud of dust on the horizon felt like danger until it passed. But as the ranch came into view, he felt a steadiness rise inside him. He was tired, but he was no longer defeated. The land he loved lay quiet, waiting for him, and for the first time in a long time, he believed he could save it. He rode straight toward the house and saw two men near the fence arguing with raised voices. They had come before sunrise, likely expecting to pressure him into giving up, but that was no longer possible. He dismounted, walked toward them, and held up the folder of papers. The men froze. He told them calmly that the truth had finally come out. He said he had proof that the land had been tampered with, the water supply stolen, and the ownership documents altered long before he ever stepped onto the property. He watched as their confidence cracked. The one who usually shouted the loudest fell silent. The other avoided eye contact, suddenly uneasy. He said he wasn't interested in revenge. He only wanted justice and the chance to rebuild what was his. He told them to leave, and after a long, tense moment, they did. Their truck rolled down the road until it became a small dot on the horizon. When they disappeared, he let out a breath he had been holding since the night before. The next days were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and quiet talks with the folks who had doubted him but were now willing to listen. The evidence he brought forward changed everything. The ranch was granted time, investigations began, and the truth spread fast. People who once avoided him now came offering help or apologies. The weight that had pressed him down for so long finally lifted. It was not gone completely, but it no longer had the power to break him. He spent long hours walking the land, checking fences, tending to the fields, and planning how to bring the ranch back to life. Each day he grew stronger, not just in body, but in spirit. He understood now that hardships had not been signs of failure, but signs of how much he still cared. And through all of it, his faithful horse stayed close, always watching, always ready to follow him anywhere. The bond between them had deepened in a way words could never describe. The biggest surprise came when he discovered that one of the maps he found showed an unused natural spring hidden deep beyond the North Ridge. He took his horse out there one warm afternoon and found the spot exactly as marked. Fresh water bubbled quietly under a cluster of rocks. He felt a rush of gratitude. With the spring, the ranch could flourish again, new crops, healthier livestock, a future he once thought impossible. As the sun lowered behind the hills, he sat on the edge of the spring and let the cool water run over his hands. He thought about everything he had endured and everything he had nearly lost. He thought about how close he had come to giving up. And he thought about the strange way life sometimes works. How help can come from the one friend who asks for nothing, gives everything, and speaks no words but understands far more than most people ever will. The ranch slowly returned to the place it had once been. Birds rested on the fence posts again, cattle moved across the fields, and the dusty yards turned green. Every improvement felt like a small victory. Every sunrise felt like a reminder that he was still standing, still fighting, still holding on to the dream that had once seemed so far away. He repaired the barn, replanted the fields, and brought in new tools. He spoke often with neighbors, shared knowledge, and welcomed company he once feared he would never have again. The fear that used to live in him was replaced by a quiet confidence. He was no longer a man running from loss. He was a man rebuilding a future with his own hands. One evening, as he finished repairing a fence line, he paused and looked across the land stretching far into the distance. His horse stood nearby, tail swaying lightly, head turned toward him. He smiled. He felt no more dread, no more doubt. The storm had passed. The land was healing, and so was he. The secret his horse had found had not only saved his ranch, but also saved him from breaking under the weight of everything he carried. It reminded him that even when the world feels heavy, hope can still rise from the most unexpected places. He reached out and laid a hand on his horse's neck, feeling the warm strength beneath the coat. The animal leaned into him gently. He whispered a quiet thank you, not expecting an answer. The soft breeze carried the smell of grass and soil, and the sky above glowed in calm colors. For the first time in a long while, he felt truly at peace. The ranch was home again, the future wide open, and he knew he would never forget the journey that brought him here or the loyal friend who led him to the truth that changed everything. The land, the horse, and the man stood together in the fading light, bound not by words but by the trials they had survived. And in that simple moment, he knew the story of his life had only just begun.